The silence in Dad's study felt suffocating as I stood there, my hands trembling against my sides. "You're not part of this family anymore," he said, his voice so cold it might as well have been a stranger speaking. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I felt my knees wobble. Behind him, my stepmother Vivian stood with her arms crossed, her lips pressed into that thin line I'd learned to fear over the past 5 years since she'd married into our family. "Dad, please," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the thundering of my own heartbeat. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. The business proposal, the investor meeting, I was just trying to help. But even as I said it, I knew it was too late. The damage was done. My attempt to salvage our failing restaurant chain by reaching out to potential investors had somehow been twisted into betrayal, painted as me going behind the family's back to steal their legacy. "Help?" Vivian's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Cordelia, you tried to sell our family's restaurant empire to strangers. You contacted investors without consulting anyone. You made us look like we couldn't handle our own business." Her perfectly manicured fingers drummed against her designer handbag. "And now, the whole industry is talking about the Mitchell family's internal drama." The room felt like it was closing in on me. 28 years of being Daddy's little girl, of working 16-hour days at the restaurants, of sacrificing my own dreams to keep the family business alive. And it all meant nothing. My throat burned as I tried to swallow back tears. "I was trying to save us from bankruptcy," I managed to say. "The numbers don't lie, Dad. We're hemorrhaging money." "That's enough." Dad's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Your things will be packed and waiting outside. Don't come back, Cordelia. And don't contact your brother or sister. They've already been told about your departure from the family. The apartment I found 3 states away was a far cry from the sprawling family estate I'd grown up in. 1 bedroom, thin walls, and a radiator that clanked like a ghost in chains every night. But it was mine, and for the first time in my life, nobody could take that away from me. The first year was brutal. I'd never realized how much of my identity had been wrapped up in being a Mitchell. Without the family name, without the connections, I was just another woman in her late 20s trying to start over with nothing but a business degree and a heart full of betrayal. That's when I met Francine at the community college, where I'd started teaching night classes in restaurant management. She was older, maybe 60, with silver hair she wore in a no-nonsense bun, and eyes that seemed to see right through people's facades. "You look like someone who's been kicked in the teeth by life," she said after my first lecture, her voice carrying a slight southern drawl. "But you're still standing. That tells me something." Francine became my lifeline. She'd built her own catering business from scratch after her husband left her with 3 kids and a mountain of debt. "Honey," she told me over coffee one evening, "family isn't just blood. Family is the people who choose to love you when you're at your worst." She helped me find clients for the small consulting business I was building, introduced me to people who needed restaurant advice, and slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild myself from the ground up. But the silence from my old life was deafening. No calls on my birthday, no Christmas cards. It was like I'd been erased from existence. My brother Donovan and sister Marlo. We'd been close once, or at least I thought we had. Now it was as if our shared childhood, all those late nights working in the restaurants together, had never happened. The few times I'd tried to reach out, my calls went straight to voicemail. My letters returned unopened. It was a Tuesday morning in late October when my world tilted off its axis again. I was grading papers at my kitchen table, steam rising from my coffee mug, when my phone buzzed with a notification from LinkedIn. Someone had tagged me in a post. Strange, since I rarely used social media anymore. But when I opened it, the blood drained from my face so fast, I thought I might faint. The post was from Harrison Blackwell, a restaurant industry journalist I'd known back in my old life. "Sad to hear about the passing of Cordelia Mitchell," it read. "She was a promising young businesswoman who left us too soon. My condolences to the Mitchell family during this difficult time." Below it, dozens of comments from industry colleagues expressing their sympathy, sharing memories of working with me, talking about what a tragedy it was to lose someone so young. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone. They thought I was dead. My own family had let people believe I was dead. The coffee mug slipped from my other hand and shattered on the floor, but I barely noticed. I scrolled through more posts, finding similar messages on Facebook, Twitter, even a brief mention in the restaurant industry newsletter. The Mitchell family had apparently held some kind of memorial service. There were photos of my father looking appropriately somber, Vivian dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, my siblings standing with their heads bowed. I called Francine with trembling fingers. "They had a funeral," I whispered when she answered. "Fran, they told everyone I was dead. There are condolence messages online, photos of a memorial service. How could they do this to me?" My voice cracked on the last word, and I found myself sobbing into the phone like a child. "Oh, honey." Francine's voice was soft but furious. "Oh, my sweet girl. Come over here right now. Don't you dare face this alone." Within the hour, I was sitting in her warm kitchen while she made tea with hands that shook with rage. "This is beyond cruel, Cordelia. This is evil. To erase someone like this, to make the world think you're gone. There's no coming back from something like this." But as I sat there, surrounded by the scent of chamomile and Francine's fierce loyalty, something unexpected began to bloom in my chest. Not just hurt, not just betrayal, but a cold, calculating anger that felt almost foreign to me. "Actually," I said slowly, "maybe there is." The next few weeks turned into an obsession. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except planning what I was going to do. Francine watched me with worried eyes as I paced her living room, muttering plans under my breath. "Honey, you're scaring me a little," she said one evening. "This isn't healthy. Maybe you should just let it go. Move on with your life." But I couldn't let it go. Not this time. I started researching, digging into what had happened to the family business during my 3-year absence. What I found made my blood boil even hotter. The Mitchell Restaurant Group hadn't just survived. They were thriving. Those investors I'd contacted, the ones who'd supposedly caused all the drama, they'd ended up partnering with the family anyway, just 8 months after I was kicked out. The company had expanded to 12 locations across 3 states, and the family had been featured on the cover of Restaurant Business magazine as the comeback story of the year. They'd used my ideas, my contacts, my strategies, and erased me from the narrative completely. In every interview, every article, the story was the same. The family had pulled together during a difficult time and emerged stronger than ever. Vivian was quoted extensively about the importance of family loyalty and protecting the legacy. My father talked about how sometimes you have to make hard choices to preserve what matters most. Not once was I mentioned, not even as a cautionary tale. The final straw came when I found the industry newsletter article about their success. There, in black and white, was Vivian's quote, "We learned that sometimes people you think you can trust will try to destroy everything you've built. But when you have real family, real loyalty, you can overcome any betrayal." My hands clenched into fists as I read it. They'd made me the villain in their story while profiting from everything I'd sacrificed for them. That's when I saw the announcement. The Mitchell Restaurant Group was hosting their annual family holiday party at the country club, the same venue where they'd held my fake memorial service. It was going to be a celebration of their expansion with all their business partners, investors, and industry contacts in attendance. The very people who thought I was dead would be there, toasting the family's success. I'm going, I told Francine that night. I'm going to walk into that party and show them exactly what they've done. My voice was steady now. All the hysteria burned away and replaced with something harder, colder. They want to pretend I'm dead. Fine. Let's see how they handle a resurrection. The night before the party, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror trying on the black dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion. It was elegant, expensive, the kind of dress the old Cordelia would have worn to family functions. But this wasn't the old Cordelia looking back at me. 3 years of rebuilding myself from nothing had carved away the soft edges, replaced the people-pleasing smile with something sharper. My reflection looked like someone who could walk into a room full of people who thought she was dead and not flinch. Francine knocked on my door around 10 that evening. "I've been thinking," she said, settling into my reading chair with a cup of tea. "Maybe I should come with you. Moral support, you know." Her eyes were worried, searching my face for cracks in my resolve. "No," I said quietly, still staring at myself in the mirror. "This is something I have to do alone. But Fran, thank you. For everything. If I hadn't met you, I would have stayed broken forever." I turned to face her, and she must have seen something in my expression because she nodded slowly. "You're not the same woman who walked into my classroom 3 years ago," she said. "That woman was barely holding herself together. This woman," she gestured at me, "this woman is dangerous in the best possible way." The drive to Pinehurst Country Club took 4 hours, and I spent every minute of it rehearsing what I was going to say. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, my breathing calm. The closer I got, the more certain I became that this was exactly what needed to happen. They'd erased me once, made me disappear while they profited from my work, my relationships, my ideas. But ghosts have a way of coming back to haunt the living. I parked across the street from the club and sat in my car for a moment, watching the valet attendants help elegantly dressed people out of expensive cars. Through the tall windows, I could see the party in full swing. Champagne glasses catching the light from crystal chandeliers, people laughing and networking, celebrating the Mitchell family's miraculous success story. My success story, with my name carefully scrubbed from every page. Taking a deep breath, I checked my lipstick one last time, grabbed my purse, and stepped out into the cold December air. The valet looked confused when I handed him my keys. Clearly, my modest sedan didn't fit the usual clientele, but he took them without comment. My heels clicked against the marble steps as I walked toward the entrance, each step feeling like a countdown to something that couldn't be undone. The ballroom fell silent in waves as I walked through the entrance. It started with the people closest to the door, their conversations dying mid-sentence as they recognized a face they thought they'd never see again. The silence spread like ripples in a pond, each person turning to stare, then grabbing their companion's arm to whisper urgently. Within moments, 200 of the restaurant industry's most influential people were staring at a dead woman walking calmly through their midst. I kept my chin high and my smile serene as I made my way toward the center of the room, where my family stood frozen like deer in headlights. My father's champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Vivian's perfectly painted face had gone white as paper, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Behind them, I could see my brother Donovan gripping his wife's hand so tightly she winced, while my sister Marlo actually took a step backward, as if I were a ghost that might drag her to hell. "Hello, everyone," I said. my voice carrying clearly through the shocked silence. I hope you don't mind that I crashed the party. I know I wasn't officially invited, but then again, I've been having some issues with my social calendar lately. Apparently, I've been dead for the past 8 months, which has really put a damper on my plans. The crowd's shocked murmur rose like a tide. I could see people pulling out their phones, some calling others, some taking pictures. Harrison Blackwell, the journalist who'd posted my obituary, stood near the bar with his mouth hanging open. Several of the investors I'd originally contacted were scattered throughout the room, their faces cycling through confusion, recognition, and something that looked like anger. Cordelia. My father finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. What are you doing here? How did you— We thought— You thought what, Dad? I asked, tilting my head with mock curiosity. That I was dead? Well, that's interesting, because I've been very much alive for the past 3 years. Teaching, consulting, building a life for myself. But imagine my surprise when I discovered that my loving family had held a memorial service for me, complete with tears and condolences and speeches about what a tragedy it was to lose someone so young. Vivian recovered first, as I'd known she would. "You're clearly disturbed," she said, her voice shaking but getting stronger. "This is a private event. Security will escort you out." I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. Oh, Vivian, always so quick to have me removed when I become inconvenient. I turned away from Vivian to address the crowd directly, my voice carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent ballroom. You see, ladies and gentlemen, 3 years ago, I was banished from this family for trying to save our failing restaurant business. I had contacted investors. Some of you are actually here tonight, because I could see we were heading toward bankruptcy. My crime was caring too much about preserving what my grandfather built. The murmur from the crowd grew louder. I could see several of the investors nodding, recognition dawning on their faces. Marcus Steinberg, one of the most prominent restaurant financiers in the country, stepped forward slightly. "Cordelia Mitchell," he said slowly. "You were the one who first approached us about the expansion project. We wondered what happened to you when your stepmother took over the negotiations." "Yes," I said, my smile never wavering. "Vivian stepped in after I was removed from the family. Funny how that worked out, isn't it? They kicked me out for betraying the family business, then used every single one of my ideas, my contacts, my strategies to build their empire. The investors I found, the expansion plan I drafted, even the marketing concepts, all of it became their miraculous comeback story." My father tried to interrupt. "Cordelia, that's not how it happened." "Isn't it?" I pulled out my phone and held it up. "Because I have copies of every email I sent, every proposal I wrote, every contact I made. 3 years of documentation showing exactly whose ideas built the Mitchell Restaurant Group's success." The crowd was completely absorbed now, phones recording, industry insiders leaning in to catch every word. I walked closer to my family, and I watched them shrink back as if I were something dangerous. Maybe I was. "But the real masterpiece," I continued, "was convincing everyone I was dead. Tell me, how exactly does one die of? What was it you told people? A tragic accident? Sudden illness? I'm genuinely curious about the details of my own demise." Vivian's composure finally cracked completely. "You left," she hissed. "You abandoned the family. What were we supposed to tell people when they asked where you were?" The ballroom was so quiet I could hear the ice settling in people's drinks. This was it, the moment I'd been building toward for months. I looked directly at my father, the man who'd raised me, who'd taught me to love the restaurant business, who'd called me his little partner until the day he threw me away. I smiled, and I knew it wasn't a nice smile. "Well, Dad," I said, my voice carrying clearly to every corner of the room. I guess reports of my death had been greatly exaggerated. The explosion of reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Phones flashed as people recorded videos, industry journalists scribbled notes frantically, and the whispered conversations erupted into full-blown discussions. I could hear fragments of shocked voices. They told us she was dead. This is insane. The Mitchell family is finished. Someone needs to call the trade publications. Marcus Steinberg stepped forward, his face grim. "Ms. Mitchell, are you saying the Mitchell Restaurant Group knowingly misrepresented the origins of their expansion strategy? Because if that's the case, we have serious concerns about our partnership." Other investors were nodding, pulling out their own phones to make calls. I could see the color draining from my father's face as he realized what was happening. "This is a private family matter." Vivian tried desperately, her voice cracking. "These are just misunderstandings, personal grievances." "Personal?" I laughed, and the sound echoed off the marble walls. "You held a funeral for me, Vivian. You stood up in front of our entire industry and mourned my tragic death while cashing checks built on my work. There's nothing personal about fraud." My brother Donovan finally found his voice. "Cordelia, please, let's talk about this privately. We can work something out. Now you want to talk?" I turned to face him, and I saw him flinch at whatever he saw in my eyes. 3 years, Donovan. 3 years of silence. Not one phone call, not one text message, not even a birthday card. You helped them erase me from existence, and now that your reputation is crumbling in real time, suddenly you want a conversation. The crowd was pressing closer now, sensing they were witnessing something historic. I could see reporters frantically typing on their phones, probably already filing stories that would be online within the hour. The Mitchell family's miraculous comeback was about to become the Mitchell family's spectacular downfall, broadcast live to the entire restaurant industry. My sister Marlo was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "We thought you were gone forever," she whispered. "Dad said you never wanted to see us again." "Did he?" I looked at my father, who stood there like a man watching his entire world collapse. "Is that what you told them, Dad? That I chose to disappear? That I abandoned the family?" My voice was getting stronger, more confident with every word. For the first time in 3 years, I felt completely, utterly powerful. The security guards were hovering at the edge of the crowd now, clearly unsure whether to intervene in what was obviously a family matter, but was happening in full view of 200 witnesses. I could see the hotel manager wringing his hands near the entrance, probably calculating how quickly this would end up on social media. That's when I saw Harrison Blackwell pushing through the crowd, his phone already recording. "Ms. Mitchell," he called out, "Harrison Blackwell from Restaurant Industry Weekly. Can you comment on your family's claims that you died? And do you have documentation proving your role in the Mitchell Restaurant Group's expansion?" The crowd parted to let him through, and suddenly I was surrounded by other journalists who'd been attending the party. This was my moment. I pulled out a folder I'd brought specifically for this purpose. I have copies of every email, every business plan, every investor contact I made on behalf of this company, I said clearly, holding up the documents for everyone to see. I also have screenshots of every social media post, every news article, and every condolence message that was sent when my family announced my death. I've spent the last 3 months documenting everything. I turned to face my father directly, and when I spoke, my voice carried to every corner of the ballroom. "You know what the truly tragic part is, Dad? I would have forgiven all of it. The banishment, the stolen credit, even letting people think I was difficult or ungrateful. But declaring me dead? Making people mourn me while you profited from my work? That crossed a line you can never uncross. My father's face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like the broken old man he actually was, underneath all the bluster. Cordelia, sweetheart, please, we can fix this. We can make this right. No, I said firmly, and the word rang out like a bell. You can't fix this, and I don't want you to. Because this, I gestured around the room full of shocked faces and recording phones. This is exactly what needed to happen. You tried to erase me, but instead, you've given me the most powerful story in the restaurant industry. The woman who came back from the dead to expose her family's fraud. I could see the realization dawning on their faces. This wasn't just personal humiliation. This was career-ending, business-destroying exposure. By tomorrow morning, every trade publication, every industry blog, every restaurant news outlet would be running the story. The Mitchell family name, which had taken 3 generations to build, was about to become synonymous with betrayal and fraud. Marcus Steinberg stepped forward again. Ms. Mitchell, given what we've learned tonight, I think several of us would be very interested in discussing future business opportunities with you directly. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting? I smiled, and this time it was genuine. I'd like that very much. I looked around the room one final time, at all the shocked faces, the recording phones, the family that had tried to destroy me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for witnessing my resurrection. I hope you all have a lovely evening. I walked out of that ballroom with my head held high, and I swear I could feel the shift in the air behind me. The woman who had slunk away 3 years ago, in shame, and heartbreak was gone forever. In her place stood someone who had been forged in the fire of betrayal and emerged stronger than steel. The valet brought my car around, and as I drove away from Pinehurst Country Club, I could see people spilling out onto the front steps, still talking animatedly, still recording videos, still processing what they'd witnessed. My phone was already buzzing with calls and messages, but I let them ring. This moment belonged to me alone. By the time I got home the next morning, the story had exploded across every industry publication. Restaurant heiress returns from the dead, read one headline. Mitchell family fraud exposed at company celebration, announced another. My favorite was from Harrison Blackwell. The greatest comeback story never told until now. The Mitchell Restaurant Group's stock price had already started plummeting, and 3 major investors had publicly announced they were pulling out of their partnerships. Francine was waiting for me with coffee and tears in her eyes. "Oh, honey," she said, pulling me into a fierce hug. "I saw the videos online. You were magnificent. Absolutely magnificent." We sat in her kitchen while I told her every detail, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You know what the most beautiful part is?" she finally said. "They tried to kill who you were, but instead they created someone unstoppable. That woman who walked into that ballroom last night, she's not the same person who got thrown out of that family 3 years ago. She's better." She was right. The scared, desperate woman who had begged her father not to cast her out was gone. In her place was someone who had learned that sometimes the family that chooses you is stronger than the one you're born into. Someone who had discovered that being discarded can be the greatest gift of all, because it forces you to rebuild yourself from the foundation up. Within a week, I had signed partnership agreements with 4 major investors. Within a month, I was featured on the cover of Restaurant Business magazine with the headline, "Phoenix Rising: How Cordelia Mitchell Built an Empire from Ashes." The Mitchell Restaurant Group eventually filed for bankruptcy 18 months later, unable to recover from the scandal and the mass exodus of their business partnerships. I never spoke to my family again, not because I was angry anymore, but because I simply didn't need to. They had given me the greatest gift possible. They had forced me to discover who I really was when everything else was stripped away. Now tell me, what would you do if you were in my place? Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your thoughts on family loyalty, second chances, and the power of rising from the ashes stronger than before.